Hi, my name is Farron Schulte.
And I'm Andrea Kazee.
And today we are introducing a new show called Simple as That. We're going to take you through lots of easy projects, do it yourself at home with easy things that you have around the house probably. And a lot of them we've got from Pinterest. So today on this show, we're going to show you this burlap runner. And Annie is going to demo that for us.
Yes, we're going to show you how simple it is to just take simple burlap and make some beautiful table settings. And it's just as simple as that. Let's go, Farron.
Let's go.
Okay, Farron, we're going to start out by working with the fabric that we've purchased.
Okay.
Now, usually when you purchase fabric from Walmart, you get this bulk of fabric that you've purchased by the yard. And sometimes it's really hard to even get past this point because you don't know where to start. So I'm going to show you the first step.
Okay.
And what you do is you take your fabric out, and you usually have this wonderful selvage, which is the straight edge. It's always straight. So you know, and that's a guarantee that that will always be straight. But this cut edge generally is usually kind of wibbly wobbly. It's not quite straight.
Right.
And where we're making runners, we want to be right with the world on both sides. We want it to be straight and straight. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to create a perfectly straight edge. And one thing about working with burlap is you can see the threads. They're very visible.
Right.
And what we're going to do is we're going to find, usually you can look at the edge and find the lowest point, or you can even cut, look back like a ½ inch and you can cut, and then you grab one of the threads.
Okay.
I'm just going to let you do this.
Okay.
If you grab that thread and then you just pull, and it kind of starts gathering, and you just take your time and you pull all along the edge, and eventually, sometimes that happens and it's okay. If the thread breaks, you just keep pulling, and what it will reveal is a negative space where that thread was.
Yeah, I can see it.
And then what you can do is put your fabric down, and you can choose, if you have a rotary cutter, which Farron,
Yes.
these are really handy. And then if you have a really nice straight edge, like this is a metal or I have a plastic ruler, you can look straight down and you can cut with a rotary cutter,
Or you can use just scissors.
just scissors.
Because probably most people would have just regular scissors.
Yeah.
Unless you're into sewing.
And it's simple as that. You just cut right along the edge, and then you'll have two straight edges. And I've already done that here, and you can see this is kind of a scrap of a piece that I shortened, and you can see it's a perfectly straight edge on all the edges.
Yep.
And then you can easily pull and fray those edges, and you can create a knotted pattern at the end. There's many things you can do with the end of the fabric once it's completely straight.
Great.
Okay, now I'm going to show you what the next step is, and that's ironing.
Okay.
Okay, so what we're going to do is I've measured my table, and I have a 70-inch table. And
Okay.
so what I want to do is I want to make my runner, you can either stop at right at the ends, which would make it a perfect 70 inches, or you can flow it over to kind of, if you're going to put let's say you put a tablecloth like we plan to do.
Okay.
Then you can measure down and have it hang over the edges. So I measured, and this is going to be 80 inches, so I'll have a 5-inch hangover on each end.
Okay.
And burlap is really, it's kind of a messy fabric. It is very loosely woven, and so it tends to make a mess, and you want to seal in those fabrics and those fibers. And so
that's why we iron.
we iron with a very hot iron.
Okay.
And this is on the highest setting, and we are also going to use steam and heat together to really bond the fabric together so it won't make a mess.
Got it.
And also it is kind of wrinkly, and you can actually bend burlap and it will keep an edge.
A crease
So it will keep a crease. So just by using your hands. So it's really important to get it nice and clean and flat. And so just some nice steam, if you want to give that a try.
Yep.
And a really good iron that has a good steam setting where you can just really pump out the steam really helps, because that will make those fibers lay really nice and flat, and then they won't make a mess. All right, next we are going to work on the striped piece that's going to go down the center.
Okay.
All right, Farron, so we have reset and we're ready to go, and this is going to be our striped fabric for our embellished runner that we're going to do. But I also want to show a few examples of something some things that are very simple, and it can be simple as creating a stencil and using just a good old Sharpie marker and writing on your burlap. And that is something that we had tried. And so what we did is we found something that we liked on the computer, and we printed them off, and then we took a razor and we created a negative image of that stencil, and then we put it over the burlap and then traced around it and came up with a really simple, easy design. And that's one of the runners that we're going to feature.
And you just used the Sharpie marker on this?
Just a Sharpie marker is all I used, and it really came out very nicely. It's nice and opaque, and just gives a little bit of, you can see the texture through it.
Yeah.
Okay, then another thing that we can do is when you are pulling your thread off of the edge of your burlap,
like we just showed.
Yes, you're going to come up with some really long pieces of twine. And sometimes it can be really hard to find matching twine for your burlap. But you already have it right there. All you have to do is collect 3 strands that you've pulled away, and you twirl them. And then as you twirl them, you iron them. And like we did before, when you iron burlap, it bonds with the heat and the pressure. And so you easily create a twisted 3-piece twine that you can use to, like for instance, this one is a really super long runner, and you can easily take the end and gather it in.
And then you would just tie it?
Just tie a nice fun bow with the twine that you made, and you didn't have to purchase anything extra. All you've bought is just some burlap from Walmart.
So you do that at either end.
And then you could do that at either end. And then also you're going to have a lot of scraps, and this is just a simple bow that I made out of a long piece of burlap.
Okay.
And then you just put the pieces together and have a small piece and quickly make a very simple and easy bow that can be put on the end, just like that.
That's really cute. Is there a technique on how you get it to just...
Well, it's kind of all personal preference, and doing it a few times. I honestly have to admit that it took me a few times to get it right.
Okay.
But what I did was I folded it in half to find the center, which is where the knot's going to be.
Okay.
Then I laid it down, and then I made equal sides so that the ends were even.
Okay.
And then I pulled all the pieces together kind of in an accordion. And then I just had this leftover piece, and I wrapped it around, and then I just used a pin.
Just a straight pin.
Just a straight pin to hold it in place so that I could later go back and either glue it with a hot glue gun, which would be really easy, or if you just had some thread, you could do it, or just a safety pin would really work. You don't even have to have any glue or sewing. A good old safety pin would work. So there you have it. There's a bow that you could put on and embellish with.
And then we have one more way to
today
do.
I want to show how simple it is and we're going to use some sewing, but you actually could do this project without using any sewing at all. So what we've purchased here is a wide striped fabric that's black and white. And what we're going to use is 3 black stripes.
Okay.
And we're going to have a black, white, black, white, black.
Okay.
And so we want to cut a straight edge along this outside black border. And again, it's really simple. We can use a rotor cutter and a straight edge, or we could use the scissors, because really you're just following along the line. You're not really, you don't have to have the rotor cutter, but it sure does make it fast and simple.
A little bit easier.
So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the straight edge here.
Okay.
And I have a nice long yardstick, and then we're going to grab the rotor cutter.
And I'll switch your spots here.
Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to just hold it on the outside border.
Okay.
And get as close as we can and hold it tight. Sometimes it's really nice to have an extra set of hands when you have a long ruler like this. And then we're going to, and just as quick as that. All right, now we remove this extra fabric. And now we know we need to take our original burlap runner. So we're going to lay this out, and we want to cut the striped fabric so that it is just a little bit, 1 inch longer on each end, or even 1.25 inches might be good. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take that straight edge, go down there. And why we're doing it this way instead of, you can measure, but this is, it's long and it's hard to measure it. So sometimes it's just easier doing it this way.
It's just a little simpler.
Yeah, just a little bit simpler. So why don't you pull it just a little bit past, pull it just maybe 1.25 inches past.
Okay.
If it helps, we can pull it up here so you can see.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take some stick pins, and I want you to just stick those in on each end.
Okay.
So that we know that it's gonna stay.
All right.
Okay, now I want you to pull it all the way your way until the end of the burlap is up. There you go. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to measure 1.25 inches. I'm going to take the straight edge. Make sure we have it all straight with the world.
Okay.
And we are going to cut that end off. I'm going to give us a little bit extra, I think, just in case. Okay, so we have our straight edge, and so we are going to, why don't you go ahead and unpin that end.
Okay.
And what we're going to use next is a really cool product called Stitch Witchery.
Okay.
And this is for all of those people who cannot sew or don't have a sewing machine.
That would be me.
Yeah, this allows you to create hems without having to use a sewing machine or even a needle and thread. It is an iron-on product, and when you need a high heat, but you really have to watch what fabric you're using because you don't want to melt your fabric. But it generally requires a high heat, and what it will do is melt the fabric or glue the fabric together, and it's nice and crisp and clean, and can be used on almost any fabric. Like I said though, you have to be really mindful of what kind of fabric. Like a synthetic fabric, you could melt the fabric too.
Okay.
So that's not a good choice.
But
this is a cotton fabric,
okay.
And we can use a nice high heat. And what we're going to do is we're going to hem, so we have a nice black edge on each side. Okay, Farron, you know, one thing I really feel is important when you do projects like this at home is really knowing your iron and knowing how to use it and what the settings mean. And I've sewn since I was a really little girl, so I do iron more than I think probably a lot of people do. And I think people who are raised with the understanding of what it can do for fabric and how important it is, they use it. But we are living in a society where no one irons anymore. We have wrinkle-free fabrics and wonderful knits. And so sometimes the iron hardly ever comes out. But in these cases where you want to do these cool projects, it's really good to understand your iron and its settings. So we're going to have our iron on a really hot setting. It's for cotton and linen. Okay. And then we're also going to use just a minimal amount of steam because our hands are going to be close and we don't want to accidentally burn ourselves. Right. So what we're going to do is take our Stitch Witchery. Okay. And we're going to start down at this end, and we are just going to match the lines up. We are going to make this really easy on ourselves. Because it's simple as that. We are not going to make this hard. So we're going to start down at this end, and we are just going to gradually, we're going to keep that Stitch Witchery right inside that hem. Okay. And we are just going to gradually move the iron down. All right. All right, so now we have our finished fabric. We're going to come over here. We're going to lay it down and get it centered up. Okay. And then we're going to pin it down, and I'll show you how to sew. All right. So first thing we're going to do is, if you want to go down on that end, let's what we can do is we can line our burlap. This table has this handy dandy grid on it, and so we can kind of line the edge up along a straight edge, if you see there.
Yep.
Then we can kind of see over here on this side, we see that it's not perfectly, it's actually a 1/2 inch over.
Sure, yep.
So we need to kind of compensate for that down the center. Now we could, I believe we should be at about 16 inches, and we are.
Okay.
But if we add for the frayed edge, we're actually about a 16.5.
Okay.
So half of that is 8 1/4. So our center line should be around 8 1/4. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep this ruler here. We're going to grab some pins, and we're going to move our fabric to where the black stripe is, right at 8 1/4. And we're going to put some pins in. Let's make sure our ends are even though. See, we need to pull it your way just a little. Let me check that. This is what I have for my end, and I think we're good.
Pretty close.
Okay, so actually I have 2 rulers, and this one's a clear ruler, so what I'm going to have you do is you can go ahead and put it down, straight edge on one side, and then you can see about where your center needs to be. So you'll just move that striped fabric until you get it right where it needs to be and put a pin in. What we're going to do is look at our sewing machine, and we're going to use a wide stitch. Like when we sew our clothes, and if we want to do like side seams, or we want it to really be tight and to hold. But this is not necessarily going to be used for wearing, and it's just going to lay. So it doesn't have to be a tight stitch.
Sure.
And the burlap is really loosely woven. So we're going to use a nice loose stitch at about a 4 1/2 or a 5.
Okay.
And we're going to let our needle be right in the middle.
Okay.
Because we're going to use just an 1/8 of an inch border right along. We're going to really hug that border. And so where I'm going to use I'm going to line it up right here with this edge. That's where the black is going to run along that edge, and the needle's going to go an 1/8 of an inch in. Okay?
Okay.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go forward 2 stitches, back 2 stitches, and then we're going to go. And why we do that is because what that back stitching does is it is kind of like the sealer.
Okay.
It creates a stopping point so that it won't come apart.
Gotcha.
Okay? Because we're doing this once. We don't want to do it again.
Nope.
So, all right, so there we go. And now we're off. So now we have these ends we need to contend with, and we want them, what we're gonna do is use our stitch witchery again. We're gonna fold them over and glue that down, and then we're gonna fold them over again, and then we'll have a nice finished edge. So let's go to the ironing board. So what I would do is just pull it off, like, yeah, let's fold that under, so we get a nice, and then we'll just pull this off down here. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is fold that over and iron that down. Yep. Okay, and pressure and heat. So go ahead and get as much of the iron on there as you can. Yeah, there you go. And again, you don't want to have a lot of steam where your fingers are in tight. You can really scorch your fingers. So after a while, it kind of gets used to it, but it's better to kind of keep your distance. Okay, and then we're going to do it again. So I'll let you do it this time. Measure off a little bit, and then just pull it off. There you go.
Okay.
All right, now put the whole thing on it and just press down nice and hard. There you go.
Okay, so then we'll do the same thing on that end, and then we'll go put it on our table.
Yeah.
All right. So we just finished this runner with our stitch witchery and a little bit of sewing, some simple cutting.
And pressing.
That's it. Very simple. Join us for our next episode where you can find easy ways to do fall decorations to decorate your home.